Good evening, good afternoon, and perhaps good morning to our friends down under, and welcome to the lecture series meeting of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Montreal. It's a particular joy for us during this unfortunate period that we're communicating with, we're providing a service to, we're meeting people from all corners of the genealogical world. And while we appreciate it, I think we are all looking forward to going back to hugging our friends and family, more than fist bumps, more than elbow bumps. But let's all hang in there together until that happens. The Jewish Genealogical Society of Montreal is almost now in our 26th year. The pandemic made it impossible for us to have a celebration, but one day soon we are going to have that celebration of our quarter century of activity. And for those of you who are not familiar with our society, we're very proud of its achievements, of the data that we have created, of the indexing of the Jewish records of Quebec from 1841 to 1942, of the data entry of more than 600,000 Canadian naturalization records, the index of which is available on Library and Archives Canada website as a gift from the Jewish Genealogical Society of Montreal. We also are delighted when people write our society and ask for help. Former Montrealers, former Canadians, people with Canadian connections, because as many of you possibly know, only Canadians and residents of Canada can get applications, can file applications for Canadian naturalizations or for the 1940 Canadian national registration. So we're happy to be able to provide that. And for those of you who have not seen our website, jgs-montreal.org, we have a dashboard for searching multiple locations all in one click. So take a look at it and maybe it'll help you in your research. Before I introduce the guest speaker, I would like to bring in Victoria Barkov to tell you a little bit about the technicalities of this evening's presentation. Vicki?
Okay, well, it's very straightforward. While you're listening to Judy's presentation, if any comments or questions occur to you, please enter them in the chat box, which, depending on how you've configured your screen, it should be either to the right or below the YouTube video. And time permitting, we will try to get to as many of these as we can after the presentation. Okay, Stan, back to you.
Thank you, Vicki. It's very special for me tonight to turn the tables. And I'm saying turn the tables because for many, many years, when I've given my presentation at the conferences of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies, my friend and colleague, my conscience, I like to say also, Judy Baston, is the lady that introduces me. So tonight, I'm going to introduce her. I'm not going to take any liberties. I'm going to do it very straightforward, Judy. Judy Baston is, amongst other things, a winner of the IAJGS Lifetime Achievement Award. She is a member of the JRI Poland board and executive committee, a leader in the Litvak SIG organization for many years, and also the moderator of the JRI Poland and Litvak SIG mailing lists. Judy knows more about research in in Lithuania that I will ever learn. And I'm looking forward to having her share some of her knowledge this evening. So without further ado, Judy, over to you.
Okay. All right. Let me bring my presentation up and then we can begin. And slideshow. And from beginning. All right. So we are researching our Litvak family tonight with Litvak Sig and more. And I say that because Litvak Sig is the main source of information for Lithuanian Jewish research. But there are going to be some other things that I'm going to touch on. So what do we mean by Litvak? It's certainly a phrase. Growing up, I was told that I must be very, very proud of being Litvak. And I don't know if you can see this, but here is a button that says proud to be a Litvak, which I bought at the 2006 New York conference. And I wear it as often as I can. But those of us who traditionally consider ourselves Litvaks, culturally, linguistically, the way we pronounce certain words, the way we pronounce certain names, Mesha instead of Moshe, and religiously, that many of our ancestors were influenced by the Vilna Gaon rather than by the Hasidim. It came from a fairly broad geographical area that originally included Latvia, northeastern Poland, Belarus, and of course, Lithuania. But for this presentation today, Litvak land will be reflected in this map. So what this shows are the 19th century administrative districts of Lithuania. And if you look at this border here, this is basically the area that is under the aegis of Litvak Sig and whose records are primarily in the Lithuanian archives. Litvak Sig's research groups, district research groups mostly, they reflect the districts in the maps, and records for every shtetl in a particular district or gubernia are included. They are Disna, Kaunas, Klaipėda, Lida, Oshmiani, Panevėžys, Raseiniai, Šiauliai or Šavel, Suvalki, and there is an asterisk, which has a little story, Švenčioniai, Telšiai, Trakai, Ukmergė, Vilnius or Vilna, and Zarsai. Why the asterisk? Because Suvalki is basically 7 districts, but for the purpose of organizing our translating and fundraising, we treat it as one entity. Some or all of the shtetls in the Disna, Lida, Oshmiani, Švenčioniai, and Zarsai districts are today in Belarus. But most of the records for those towns are in the Lithuanian archives. So those districts are under Litvak Sig. But even in the cases where the records are in the Belarus archives, the translation activity and fundraising activity takes place under Litvak Sig. There is an excellent cooperative relationship between Litvak Sig and what used to be called Belarus Sig and is now called the Belarus Research Division of Jewish Gen. And I mean, this is how it ought to be in every case. But basically, if anybody is interested in records for example, Lida or Oshmiani, which districts that I coordinate, you contribute to Litvak Sig, you ask your questions to Litvak Sig, etc. The records end up after 18 months in both the Litvak Sig All Lithuania database and the Jewish Gen Belarus database. So Litvak SIG is an independent organization, and our database and discussion group are hosted by Jewish Gen. It basically means that those two features live on the Jewish Gen server. But while Litvak SIG enables its data to be displayed on Jewish Gen, in the Jewish Gen Lithuania database and in the Jewish Gen unified search, it's important to remember all activity around Lithuanian Jewish records takes place through Litvak SIG. I see a lot of messages in various discussion groups that say, I saw this on the, this Jewish Gen record from Lithuania, this, it's not. Does it matter? Yeah, it's more than pill pull, because if you want to know where you're going to get an authoritative answer to your question, that's Litvak SIG. If you want to know how you can contribute to records for your town or your area, that's Litvak SIG. It's not Jewish Gen. So most records, census type records, which are called mostly revision lists and family lists, vital records and more, have been translated with funds that are raised through the district research groups of Litvak SIG. A contributor to a research group of $100 US or more, will take more, they gain immediate access to translated data. And that's at least 18 months before that data is submitted to Litvak SIG's All Lithuania database and is available for public search. And that data is available on the research group site for 5 years for a $100 contribution. And so I like to say it isn't just the new data, it's being able to look at the old data, all the data in an Excel file. There is no substitute for an Excel file. If I had my chance, I keep threatening that someday, next time we have an in-person conference, I'm going to have a shirt that says browse, because I'm a great believer that you can find a lot of things by browsing and sorting. So if you're already a participant, which is a nice way of saying contributor, in a district research group, click on log into your account, and then that will take you to your dashboard, and then you find your data. You'll find dozens of files of translations for your town and nearby towns. And like I said, no substitute for sorting and browsing. You're going to find names you forgot you were looking for. You're going to find names with spelling variants that tell you, that may very well be my family. So this is what the data page of one of our district research groups looks like. This is for Trakai. And you can see this is just the revision list, the census type records. And for some there are more. For Olkanik, for Volkaniki, for Daskunuskas, there are fewer, but you see, you get them, and you can download. You can look at them on the site, or you can download them to your own computer. This is how you join a district research group. You go join contribute, and you click on research groups, and then you scroll down to the 1 or 2 or 3 that you want and make your contribution. We will talk in a few minutes about the translations you can find on district research group sites. But in addition to those records that are translated through district research groups, there are dozens of files of Lithuanian Jewish records, not limited by district, that are now being translated by Litvak SIG. Most of them come from the Lithuanian State Central Archives, and we'll have a lot more about these records later in this presentation. Most of these records are 20th century records. Some of them are what would be called secondary records. They're not revision lists. They're not birth, marriage, and death records, but some of them are so valuable. And all DRG participants have access to these translations, most of which are on a site called Collective Data. And they are see, if you are a contributor to a district research group or 2 or 3, you'll have a dashboard. Here's a dashboard. And one of the icons there shows Collective Data. The others are the district groups and also a members site, because if you pay Litvak SIG dues, $50 a year, you are able to go to a password protected members site and get a number of other features. So how do you find out what records exist for your Litvak town? If you're not sure the current spelling, go to Litvak SIG shtetl list and find out what district the town is in. Go to the district page and you'll get the current spelling. Search the routes to roots. I did it right this time. Routes to roots database and the Litvak members website to find out what records are available. And check the DRG site, write to the coordinator, because Litvak SIG is regularly informed about new records that are being found in the archives. Russ Maurer, who is our records acquisition coordinator, then lets the district coordinators know, and there's a conversation. Shall we go after these? Shall we translate them? So let's search the archive database at RTR Foundation, and you will all forgive me, I hope, if I put in the town of Eshishkis or Eshishuk, where my father was born. So these are the first stage results of the search. And you see birth, census, death, divorce, immigration, and also immigration at the Jewish Historical Institute, because between the 2 world wars, it was part of Vilna gubernia, which was considered Poland. And these results are part of the JRI Poland database. So if you see something there for yourself, you should go over to JRI Poland and search for your name and marriage. So let's go look for census. All right, so we're looking for census for the town of Eshishkis. And what we see are 3 census results. Does that sound right? It sure didn't sound right to me the first time I saw it. I mean, I know that there were a lot more revision lists and family lists. And then I look at the last line and it says, see also Lida Uyezd. And Uyezd is the Russian word for district. So I make another search. And by the way, this is Eshishkis, this is Lida. It could be any town and any district. If you find that you're looking for a town and you find very few census records, search by the district it's in. This is what you find when you search for Lida Uyezd. You find an awful lot of census records. However, you'll see that you do not find the ones that are only for the town of Eshishkis. So it's like it's not a one-stop shop. You should search for the town, and you should search for the district. Let's look for births. For the town of Eshishkis, the births is the surviving births, or the surviving and available births range from 1891 to 1939. And you see the year. Now, you can also see the year and you see what you don't see. Between 1894 and 1896, between 1914 and 1916, 1915, the beginning of the war, 1921, there appear to be, at this point, no records. So you learn that. Most towns in Lithuania have surviving, and that's the operative word, surviving, vital records that begin from the 1850s to 1870s, and they may continue until 1939. But while marriages and deaths can be made public after 75 years, current Lithuanian law embargoes births for 100 years. Lithuanian records, there are a lot of different kinds of Lithuanian records, but the basic categories are vital records, births, marriages, deaths, and yes, divorces, and revision lists, which are essentially financial censuses. A vital record is made in the town where a birth, marriage, or death takes place, or if it's a tiny, tiny village, it will be recorded in the next largest town. A revision list reflects a family's official town of registration. So even if the family has moved to a nearby town, there is a very good chance that they may still be officially registered in the place where they were registered 20, 50, etc. years ago. So you know your family lived in a certain town. You've seen that town listed in the passenger list where they came over, or some other more contemporary document, but you can't find them. When you search the All Lithuania database, you can't find them in that town. So they may have been registered in a nearby town. And one moral is don't focus your search too narrowly. If you have an unusual surname, don't bother searching for the name in the town. Just search for the name. But often, how do you find where they were registered? Often a birth or marriage or death record will list a town of registration if that's different. Here are search results from the All Lithuania database. I think this is one of my uncles, actually. And, born in Ashishuk, but it says family registered in Lida. And so you go over, and if you didn't do so already, you look in the records for Lida. So you go to the All Lithuania, you search the All Lithuania database, you search here, you click here. And there are various search options. You can search by surname, given name, town, any field. By sounds like, starts with, phonetically, exactly, and fuzzy. And you can also search by district or gubernia. Lithuanian surnames have different suffixes according to gender or status. A man's Lithuanian suffix will be end in is or ius. An unmarried woman will be aite, aite, and a married woman will be ayene. And here are examples from the index to the Yisker 1940 internal passport applications. Unfortunately, it was only an index. So here, this is my grandfather where the name is Bastunsky, but with the Lithuanian ending, it's is. My cousin Sorka, and it's Aiti, and her mother Rivka, and it's Ayene. But Lithuanian Jewish records were kept in different languages at different times. And during the Russian Empire period, which is basically all of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th, most records were in Cyrillic. And that is the revision list, the censuses, family lists were in Cyrillic Russian, but also in vital records, they were in Russian on one side and Hebrew on the other side. And the two sides are almost identical. You will see that if a child is born, on the Hebrew side, he would be named Zev, for example, and Wolf on the Russian side. But, it's interesting to compare if you can. But Vilna gubernia, the town of Vilna And the other towns, mostly south of that, were under Polish control in the period between the two world wars. So those records during that period were kept in Polish. And at exactly that time, between the two world wars, was the period of independent Lithuania. And that is the only period, the only period of Lithuanian records where the records are in Lithuanian. And people said, oh, do I have to understand Lithuanian? Well, those are the only records that are in Lithuanian. So what is a fuzzy search? And this is a Litvak cat, by the way. Fuzzy searching is a feature that can help you find close matches that will elude the sound X, because the letters are just not the same. Here are variants from two revision lists from exactly the same family. I checked them. The first names in each of the family and the ages are the same, but the original records had these differences: Platkovsky, Platovsky, Burlak, Burlan. I mean, sure, you could say starts with Burla, but most people aren't going to do that. Goldovsky and Goldansky, which is what it is, and Kopperman and Koppelman, and it's Koppelman. So if you search for example, for Koppelman in a fuzzy search, you will bring up Kopperman, but you won't bring up Koppelman. And if you're totally confused already, I apologize, but it really does, it makes things clearer. So you're searching with multiple fields, and this is something that you can do on the sorry about that, on the All Lithuania database, but cannot do on the Jewish Gen Lithuania database or others without basically being a contributor of $100 or more. So there's one researcher who did not know the name of her great-great-grandfather. So she searched the ALD for her great-grandmother's two names, Shana and Tauba. And she comes up with a result. So here you see, she got the answer in the birth record of Shana Tauba's son. The ALD went 2 generations ahead in front to come up with an answer for 2 generations back. And it says Shana Tauba's father is Chaim Leib. So this is our friend's great-great-grandfather. One way to focus your search, but still get the flexibility of using sounds like, is to put the first letter of a surname in square brackets, not curved brackets, nothing but square brackets like this. Actually, you can put any letter in square brackets, but for now, let's just concentrate on the first one. If you do that, you will only get search results that begin with the letter V. You won't get P's or B's, but you won't get Wilensky either. So if you're looking for records, interwar records, while Vilna was under Polish control, you're out of luck, because you will not get that. Again, this is something, sometimes you have to search several different ways to maximize your efforts. And searching for your surname in an uyezd or a gubernia also gives you more flexibility than just listing a town. So this is what I was referring to earlier. As an independent organization, Litvak SIG allows our data to be displayed in a search of the Jewish Gen Lithuania database, but there are some differences. Both databases do offer searches by gubernia and district. But with the Litvak SIG All Lithuania database, you can search more than one field like surname and town, or two given names as a standard option that is free. This is available on the Jewish Gen Lithuania database only to donors of $100 plus to the Jewish Gen General Fund. Now, I happen to think that Jewish Gen offers researchers a lot, and everyone who can ought to donate to Jewish Gen. But if you can't, and even if you can, if you search the ALD, this is the way you will maximize your efforts. With the Jewish Gen Lithuania database, you do get data from other Jewish Gen databases, such as the Family Finder. It's also possible to use Jewish Gen's unified search, which searches all Jewish Gen databases from all countries, but it has the same search restrictions as the Jewish Gen Lithuania database. It's also important to know that although about 12 years ago, some Litvak SIG data was added to Ancestry.com, none, N-O-N-E, has been added since. So Ancestry can be a great place to look for other records, but their holdings of Eastern European Jewish records are incomplete. So let's back to actually searching the ALD. Here are what the stage 1 search results look like. And your tendency would be to click on this, but if you click on this, you will get an explanation of what these records are like, but what you really want are the records. So you click here, list 4 records. What kinds of information can we learn from different sorts of Lithuanian Jewish records? Revision lists, for example, include the following: town, district, gubernia of registration. Remember, these are revision lists. Surname, given name, father's name, not mother's name, but father's name. The mother will be listed as an extra person, but they don't list the mother's name, and definitely not the mother's maiden name. Relationship within family, what was the age during this revision list and the age at the last one. The reason the individual left and the year if they're missing from the family, and comments. And comments can refer to relationships or why a person is missing, etc. So here's some search results in the ALD, and it shows you kind of how this is listed. And here are a couple of reasons why a person is missing. Somebody died, somebody ran away. This is from the Excel file of a revision list, and you can see a bunch of them escaped, exiled to Siberia, and recruited, which is the same as conscripted. Other reasons left include died, and it frequently has the year of death, was a prisoner, moved to another Jewish community, and when that happens, they almost always name it, so you'll know where they went, disappeared, converted to Christianity, yes, there were a few of those, and run away. There are references to previous lists, and they can be illuminating or they can be frustrating, or both, because sometimes the previous lists are missing. Here is an 1834 revision list, I think from Oshmiani, and it cites that somebody was 4 years old in the 1818 additional revision. The regular revision list was 1816, but for people who were not enumerated, not captured in that list, or maybe who lived in little villages outside the town, there was an additional revision or a supplemental revision. And isn't that exciting? So yes, it still existed in 1834, but it certainly did not exist in 1990 or 2010, or certainly not, it doesn't exist anymore. And that was very, very, a couple of people have called me very excited. Can we get this translated? If we can find it, we can. But it just disappeared with the years. Sometimes death records often include the cause of death. That's fairly standard with Lithuanian death records. You can see here, sepsis, old age, fracture. But sometimes this is one of the places that you can find a woman's maiden name. And this Sarah Kaganovich was my step-great-grandmother. And it says, who was her father? Her father was Chaim Kaplan. So although I knew of her as Sora Pachianko, because that was she was a widow when she married my great-grandfather, here is her maiden name. Marriage records can also show remarriages or divorces. And interestingly here, and I'm not quite sure why there's so many in this particular group, but a bunch of them are, they're middle-aged. They're not kids, let's put it that way. Some ALD search results contain links to microfilms, but finding the actual microfilm image by using that link can be confusing. But remember that the entries in the All Lithuania database contain complete translations. They do not contain indices or extracts. These are complete translations of records. So it's nice to see an original record, but there's no additional information of great genealogical value. The link takes you to the film, and then it takes you to a page that looks like this. So it is possible to get there, but at the beginning, what were microfilmed were vital records. But now revision lists are being microfilmed as well. Litvak SIG has translated almost all revision lists for the ALD, and we constantly check new microfilms that show up against our translations. Read the comments field carefully, because there can be several different facts in the comments field. Registered in the Zaskavici Jewish community, so there's one, of the Oshmiani district. Lived in Vilnius and Lukishkis, in the house of a tanner named Belazarov. So there's 4 or 5 separate facts that are compressed in one column. If you look at the Excel file, you will see that each one, or almost every one, will be in its own field. So in some ways they're easier to see, and they're certainly easier to sort. So this can be exciting. Here's a particular search result from an ALD marriages database. My friend Robin Magan, a number of years ago, asked me to see if I could find something for a fellow who was, I think, a Lublin researcher from Israel, and his name was Ben Ali's, and he had a story for her. His grandfather had just died, and a mystery woman came to the funeral and said that she used to be married to his grandfather. Nobody had ever heard of her, and she left before she could tell anybody her name or any more about her. And this, naturally, he was very, very interested. So actually, you see here, even in the ALD, you see that the grandfather, Moshe Ben Ali's, was married to Bela Segalovich. And where did he come from? He came from Tel Aviv, Palestina, in the 30s. So I took a look at the Excel file of marriages for that town. And you see that in the mid to late 1930s, everything I have highlighted in yellow, these are grooms who came from Palestina. There's a story there. There's got to be a story there. It shows why there's nothing like browsing. I don't know any conclusive answers. I have been told that it's likely that a Zionist youth group, basically they sent their men who were already in Mandate Palestine and Eretz Israel to Lithuania to either get their girlfriends or other women who were part of that Zionist youth group and bring them to, either they married them in Lithuania or they brought them to Eretz Israel to be married. And a lot of us are doing we moved from just doing our own family history to doing community history. This is community history. And it's something that you wouldn't necessarily find out just looking at the result of one particular person or one particular family. So here are some of the types of lists in the All-Lithuania database. Revision lists and other census lists, vital records. Household registers, and you're going to be hearing more about that. Tax lists and voter lists. Passport and citizenship lists, directories, Holocaust lists, cemetery lists. I want to comment on the tax lists and voter lists is a category, a template category that Litvak SIG uses for its translations. And the content of the things in that category is way broader than tax lists or voter lists. So if you do a search and you get search results under the category tax lists and voter lists, and you think, well, I'm not interested in that, they couldn't have been voted, look at it anyway, because you might be surprised. Internal passports. After World War I, all Lithuanians, not just Litvaks, not just Jews, needed to have an internal passport to reside in Lithuania. And this document has a lot of genealogically valuable information and often a photograph as well, as you saw. Although Vilna gubernia was not considered a part of interwar Lithuania, because it was under Polish control then, there are also internal passports for Vilna and other towns in Vilna gubernia. So let's take a closer look at some exciting new record groups that have been and are being translated by Litvak SIG. Sort of related to internal passports, before they came back and needed an internal passport, in May 1915, at the beginning of World War I, many Jews were sent to interior Russia. And after the war, tens of thousands of the surviving displaced Lithuanian Jews tried to return to Lithuania, almost all of them passing through a frontier quarantine station in a little town of Obalai, or in Yiddish, Abel. In Obalai, each family head filled out a questionnaire indicating where they intended to go if they were readmitted to Lithuania, and details about each family member, such as the date and place of birth, maiden name, father's name, etc. Many of these questionnaires have been preserved in the Lithuanian State Central Archives and are being translated by Litvak SIG. So other lists of Jews deported under Soviet repression, about 2,500 names, continuing with the German World War I era passports, 1942 ghetto prisoners lists, those have been done. Those are, I don't know what word to use, very satisfying in some ways, even though they're very tragic. Count as passport envelopes. This is, you can see this is the description of Jews deported under Soviet repression. Now to the jewel in the crown, the Vilna household registers. From 1919 to 1941, information was collected about Vilna residents, even those who were just visiting. There were more than 13,000 registers, 13,000 books. Litvak SIG has already translated more than 65,000 lines from the household registers and distributes them to donors in batches of 5,000. I say lines rather than people because there's a line, there's an entry when somebody moves in, there's an entry when they leave, there's an entry when they come back with the date and with information about where they were. This is what a page of the household registers looks like. And there will be a quiz in 5 minutes. No, but you can see how much, you can absolutely see how much information is on there. For example, parents' names, and including the mother's maiden name, hooray, birth date and place, the place one is going to, marital status, nationality, visitors to the house, and more. Even if you did not have family in Vilna, or you thought you didn't have family in Vilna, many refugees from Poland escaped through Vilna at the beginning of World War II. So there is a data set in JRI Poland, the Joint Distribution Committee Vilna refugee list. And if you find names in that, you may also find them in the Vilna household register and cross-check and possibly find additional information. The Vilna household, including among those people, were people who were saved through the efforts of Chiune Sugihara, the heroic Japanese consul to Lithuania. So in my case, looking at the JRI Poland JDC refugee list, I found my cousin, Abram Shabtai Kanapiati. I didn't know at that point exactly how he was related to me, but if he's a Kanapiati and he's Jewish from Poland, he's mine. So I checked with Russ, who is coordinating the household registers, and I said, might he have been in them? And he sure was. And I found out who his father was and was able to not only place him in my family, but let his great niece know. She had never heard of him. She had no idea that he escaped. And that was very satisfying. In May of 1942, there was a countrywide Lithuanian census taken, and it included the inhabitants of the ghettos in Vilnius, Šiauliai, and the ghettos of Ošmiany, Svir, and Švenčion areas. These lists, as well as those from Trakai and Ukmergė, are now searchable in the ALD, but their Excel files of these lists are browsable on the District Research Group site. For example, if you want to know who lived in the same house as your family in the ghetto, you look at the Excel file of this list and you find out. So I know that this is called researching your Litvak family, but many of us also want to learn about our Litvak town. Litvak SIG has a shtetl map and with links to resources, and you click on a star, and in this case, we've clicked on a star that brings up Saduva, and it gives us this information. By enlarging the map, I don't expect that you can see these too well, but by enlarging the map, you can see the small villages in the area. From the Lithuanian State Historical Archive, there's a map, in this case of Kupiškis, right here. And you keep zooming in, and you can see a really detailed map of Kupiškis with the house numbers and all of that. The Jewish Gen Communities page has many links to research a town. You can see them up here. Family Finder, Yisker books, Kahila links. We'll talk more about these things. Perhaps the most valuable feature on the Jewish Gen Community page is a list of nearby Jewish communities within, I think, basically 30 miles. Save this list to your computer. I used to say, cut it out and put it on your refrigerator, but that's old school. If you're searching the All Lithuania database, or you're even searching the Jewish Gen Family Finder for a surname, and you don't find that surname from the town where you know or think your family lived, but you find a listing in one of these communities and it's 10 miles away or 9 miles away or even 21 miles away, then there's a chance it makes sense then to write somebody from that town. Other links from a town, like I just said, Family Finder, Yisker books, Kahila links. There are many Litvak Kahila links. This is the page for Kapishkis, and you can see, I'm not going to read them all, or any of them actually, but you can see that there are a lot of different articles, because there's not only an active genealogical genealogical research community around that town, there is an active community around that town, Kupishkis and Rokiskis, and of survivors and people second generation, so that they have done these things. The Yisker books you can see include many for Litvak towns. Many of them are in larger collections, like Yahadut Lita and all, but some of them are individual, and some towns have their own books. Yisker books in print is a new feature from Jewish Gen, and it brings things full circle. Basically, the Yisker book translation project took hard copy books in Yiddish and Hebrew, or some combination, and they translated them to English, which was online, and then these have been published in hard copy. Here are a couple of new ones for Lithuania. It's from Svension and from Divinishuk, and they can be in libraries, etc. And the Montreal Jewish Public Library has these books for Lithuania. It's no surprise for me, because I work in a Jewish public library in San Francisco and have tremendous envy, let's put it this way, tremendous envy for all the resources of the Montreal Jewish Public Library. Anyway, for Dusetos, Yonava, Yerbarkas, and Rokiskis, those books are in the Montreal Jewish Public Library. And so you can see this one here. There was a shtetl in Lithuania, as well as many, many books that are of interest to Jewish Litvak researchers, like The Jews of Kupcheva, and the author is a Montreal girl, Dorothy Levers, very dear friend of mine, and something very different. Enemies for a Day, Anti-Semitism and Anti-Jewish Violence in Lithuania under the Tsars. Well, I've never heard of it. I'm not saying that I've heard of all all valuable, but it just goes to show you the depth and breadth of the collection in the Montreal Jewish Public Library. And you can take books out. You basically have to not only take the book out online, but arrange and make an appointment to pick it up. But this is something that it's a very valuable resource. So for those of you who still live in the Montreal area, I hope you take advantage of it. You can search or browse names from the Lithuanian Holocaust Names Project at the Holocaust Library at this. By the way, I don't know if anybody said anything. I will figure it out. I know that there is a handout for this talk, and the URLs that I'm providing here are in that handout. Victoria, you're going to say something?
Yes, I've posted the link to the handout in the YouTube chat, and that link also appears on the Montreal Jewish Genealogical website.
Okay. Thank you. So there are also many resources to research your Litvak towns in the YIVO Vilna collection. I mean, in person, it's in New York, but a tremendous amount of this material is online. And it's actually called the Vilna collection because the collection was kept in Vilna. It is not all about Vilna, but it's mostly about Lithuania. Among the many documents that are included, there are questionnaires and other materials on Litvak yeshivas, autobiographies that were written by youth from Lithuanian towns such as Vevis, Varnai, Zemelis, Merkin, Meritz, Ezvilikas, Kovna, Panavez, and Shavel. Lists of Jewish organizations, election lists, donor lists. Some of these are being digitized, and I went, no surprise, I went to Ashiskis, and I see a donor list for the Ashiskis Yeshiva, and on the fourth line, here is Shmuel Bastunsky, and that's kind of cool. You also find, when you're talking about community history, there were news clippings that talked about a book burning in a yeshiva town and the suspicions that some of the yeshiva bookers may have had something to do with it. And one day I will, like I said, I'll blow this stuff up so I can read it, and I will try to translate this article. There are many other resources to help your research on the Litvak Sig website, as well as the Litvak Sig members website. The Litvak Sig has Litvak Sig's discussion group and the Sig List message archive. There are more than 2,900 subscribers on the Litvak Sig discussion group. Older messages back to 1998 can be searched via the Sig List message archive. Now, Litvak Sig's list and JRI Poland's list and Gesher Galicia's list are still on the Lyra system for now. As far as I'm concerned, I'm in no hurry. I'm in no hurry to move it off anywhere, but I can't say it'll be there forever, but for now, that's where it is. As I mentioned before, each district research group has its own password protected website. This is for Oshmiani. Litvak Sig is on Facebook. Primarily, they are announcements of new translations that Litvak Sig has added to the All Lithuania database or to the research group sites. On the Litvak Sig homepage, there's a menu of links to all kinds of important information. Archives and repositories, frequently asked questions, shtetls, a given names database, online journal, image library, books, internet links. Contact information for archives. Even though records in the ALD are fully translated, if you want to order a copy of a record, you use this particular archival citation. Not, one that looks like that. Well, anyway, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry, it took me a while to unmute there. Sorry about that. Yes, that was fantastic. There are not a lot of questions because the presentation was so extensive, so complete, and so clear. But we do have a few. So
I'm happy to try to answer them.
Okay. Annette Weiss asks, how often were revision lists created?
There were 10 official revision lists from, I believe, 1780s through 1858. And it wasn't automatically every 10 years, every 10 or 16 years. And after 1858, there were family lists or additional revision lists. However, there were the whole idea, they are official, in Russian, they're called revisky skaski, the revision of the story or the tale. And what it means is there are a couple of reasons why, especially a lot of Jews, tried to evade enumeration in revision lists. Number one, it's a financial census. And if you're not listed, then the chances are you may not have to pay taxes or as much taxes. But more to the point may be, if you have young boys and they are listed on a revision list and they're getting to be close to being 18, well, that makes it much easier to pinpoint them and conscript them. So families tried in a variety of ways to evade that, but then in the additional revision lists or whatever, or even the next one people came in. So you'll look and you'll see there's some 10 years, like 1850 to 1858 or 1816 to 1834. And by the way, if you look at the numbers, the ages that people are supposed to be in 1834, and then this one and that one, that doesn't make sense. So you will find out that the enumerator didn't necessarily have a PhD in mathematics.
Okay, next question. Howard Goldstein asks, if there isn't a link to the microfilm, but only a reference to the archive fund, and then he gives an example, LVIA 1009/8/832, where can we obtain a copy of that microfilm?
If you want a copy, you write to the archive.
Okay, quick
It's
answer.
like I just said, you write in the FAQs, there are archival addresses, and LVIA is the Lithuanian State Historical Archive.
Okay.
But I will look, sometimes it's just really nice to have the original record, but these are complete translations. But sometimes people say that couldn't be right. That doesn't make sense to me. I want to look at the original. So this is how you do it.
Okay, more questions are coming in fast and furious here. Howard has another question. Are 1897 all Russia census records available for Lithuania?
There are very sparsely, and there, this is one of those strange things. Howard Margle and Peggy Friedman translated a small number of those. I think, and this makes no sense at all, I think if you look at what they did with those, was they provided them to Jewish Gen rather than Litvak Sig initially. It's very incomplete, woefully incomplete. Most of it was, but I think if you look in the Jewish Gen Lithuania database for your surname, if it still exists, that's where you'll find it.
Okay. Miriam Cohn, she has a very specific question, which in a way, your presentation has probably already answered, but I'll send it to you anyway. How would I find traces of my uncle, Hirsch Levine, his wife, and 2 daughters? They lived in Mariampol.
When? I wish she could tell me when. I mean, it would.
Miriam, if you're listening, post when they lived there.
Okay. I mean, unfortunately, Levine is not the most unusual name in the world. You have to have a certain amount of intellectual Sitzfleisch, patience, to search for a name like Levine. But search for, now, there are two things, and Stan can correct me here. Are there Mariampol records in JRI Poland as well? This is part of the Suwałki gubernia. So this is, I'm going to say 3 things. Litvak Sig and JRI Poland have a very cooperative relationship when it comes to records from towns in the Suwałki area. But so you may want to search both the databases of Suwałki, of Lithuania, the ALD, the All Lithuania database, and JRI Poland. But I suggest you write to the district coordinator for the Suwałk gubernia, who is Dorothy Levers. Just go to the page that deals with, districts and click on that, click on Dorothy, write to Dorothy, and she's just the dearest person in the world. And if she has some ideas, she will have knowledge of those records that have been translated that are not on the database yet. And if there are a lot, if she says, look, I'm telling you, I'm honest, there are an awful lot of Levines that we've just translated. You may want to contribute and get access to the district page, or she'll say, you know, I can't help you right now. We don't have that much. So I suggest you write to Dorothy.
Yeah, Miriam, this may no longer be relevant because you've given such a full answer, but Miriam now posted that they lived there until the war and were rounded up, but I don't know when.
I do not know exactly what memorialization exists for the Mariupol Jews. Dorothy might be helpful for that too, because there may be a Yisker book there. So a Yisker book, a Kahila link that might have some information. And certainly, if you have not already looked at Yad Vashem, at the database of Shoah victims' names in the old days. I'm not sure exactly what I mean by the old days, but there was access to an archival lists database on Yad Vashem, and you could enter the name of a town and all kinds of things would pop out. Either references, either actual digitized records or references to lists there. But at this point, that link is not there. But try searching the Shoah victims and names in database. Look and see if there's a Yisker book for Mariupol. Look and see if there's a Kahila link for Mariupol. Because there may be a necrology, a list of those who perished.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have. There's a thank you with an exclamation mark, and with which I concur. And Stanley, back to you.
Thank you, Vicki. Just one question, Judy, that I put in the chat box in the Zoom, and that is, what level of service can one expect from the Lithuanian archives in general?
Well, that's a good question. You mean if you write them about a specific, the more specific you are, you know, I'm looking for this name. You used to be able to say, I'm looking for all records dealing with the Kaganovich family in Eshishkis, and you would send a research fee of $70 or something, and they would send you a précis, say a kind of a summary of what they had. I'm not sure that they do that exactly that anymore. So the other problem is that the archives right now are largely closed because of COVID. So this is not a time to get, you know, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking, for example, for internal passports, there's a way to, there's a liaison through Litvak SIG to get that. We also have a couple of people who are close to the archives, but are basically not, not archival employees who can be helpful. So I'm sorry, Stan, that's not a, if somebody writes and say, I want a copy of this page and this citation, you will get that. But if you're writing for a more open-ended research, actually, I have to say this. Most of the records that are in the Lithuanian archives have already been translated by Litvak SIG. We are constantly being told about some more things. A lot of what we're finding now is from the Lithuanian State Central Archives, but we are finding some things from the historical archives. A lot of the people who were the heads of those archives for years and years and years are no longer the heads of those archives. The people who are there are very helpful, but it's a different, there isn't the continuity.
We have another comment here from Anita Gabe, which I may be mispronouncing, and I'm about to
I know that name.
mispronounce.
Yeah.
You do. And I'm about to mispronounce some more towns after Mariampol, was it? That I
That was
first
good.
mispronounced, but there's more coming. She said, yes, Yisker books usually have a necrology list, and there are stories by survivors who may refer to many individuals in that town. And then she says, Svensson Smorgon is in English at the Jewish Public Library. I assume she means Montreal Jewish Public
Oh,
Library.
you think so? I looked for it and I didn't see it, but great. Sven, that's one of the new ones, so that's great. Svenciona's, yeah, okay. So if you're connected to Svencion and you're part of the Oshmiani Research District, go find that. Thank you, Anita.
Stanley, I think we seem to have. I think that's it. I think we've come to the end of the comments now, unless more appear. But for now, that's it.
Thank you again, Vicki. While Judy was talking, she mentioned about contacting Dorothy Levers, former Montrealer now living in London, England. And Dorothy has special expertise. And it's always wonderful when you're able to tap that special expertise. And I want to preface my comment about Judy by saying or answering a question that I get all the time. How did you learn so much? And I think Judy is an illustration of what happens over many, many years of getting involved in Jewish family history research, particularly when you expand from being just a genealogist interested in your own family to trying to help others. And I think all of us have heard that expression so many times. If you want to learn, teach, because when you are teaching, you are forced to learn at the same time. And what we've heard this evening is pure learning by teaching and vice versa. And Judy, we thank you so much for sharing your incredible knowledge of the Lithuanian research story with us tonight. We're blessed to have you. We hope you'll come back again with some new stuff whenever that happens. And we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you, Judy. And thank you all for tuning in this evening. We look forward to seeing you in the near future when we have another presentation of the Jewish Genealogical Society in Montreal. Thank you all. Good night, good morning, good afternoon. We'll see you soon. Be well.